It happened on a Monday. Funny how the ordinary can shift into something unforgettable without warning. I had no plans that evening, just cleaning up the house while Ellie was in the shower humming along to some playlist upstairs. I ended up in the home office, a space we shared but one she used more often. Her side of the desk was a mess, post-its stuck in every direction, receipts crumpled under books, highlighters without caps bleeding onto folders. It was the kind of chaos she called organized, and I'd given up trying to make sense of it. I bent down to straighten a stack of papers near the filing cabinet, and that's when I noticed it. A folder peeking out from under the desk like it had been dropped and forgotten. It was just a basic manila folder, nothing about it screamed importance, but I picked it up anyway. It was heavier than I expected, filled with loose papers and hotel brochures. As I lifted it, a single receipt slid out and landed at my feet face up. I still remember the way my heart paused. It was from the Riverstone Hotel. A 2-person suite. Late checkout. Dinner package included. The billing information? Ellie Banks. My wife. My partner. My person. I blinked at the date. Saturday. 3 days ago. The same Saturday she told me she'd be at a business conference in Greenville about 2 hours away. I remember because I'd packed her suitcase for her while she was on a call, dropping in her favorite cardigan and those little travel bottles she liked. She even left with a lanyard around her neck, one of those conference badges with a barcode and her name. And yet, there it was. Riverstone Hotel. 2 guests. Saturday. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe it was old. I flipped it over, nope. Fresh ink. Printed 3 days ago. The total was a few $100 with a signature line that read, Ellie B. I held the receipt like it might bite me. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't call her out. I sat on the edge of the office chair, just sitting, staring at the paper. I felt this wave, like cold water running down the back of my neck, of realization that something wasn't adding up. When she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel with her wet hair dripping down her back, she noticed me holding the receipt. Her face didn't change. Not even a flinch. Oh, that, she said, her voice light. God, I meant to throw that away. It was such a mess. She walked over, reaching for it casually. I didn't let go. You stayed at Riverstone? Mom, she said, smiling as if I just asked about a dinner reservation. There was this huge mix-up with the hotel where the conference was supposed to be. Total nightmare. They overbooked, so I paid for the room myself and let my coworkers crash. I was the only one with a corporate card that would go through. She made it sound so reasonable. So boring. You paid for 2 guests? She tilted her head slightly. Yeah. Hannah stayed with me. I think you've met her, she's got the blonde bob, super sarcastic? I nodded slowly. I couldn't remember a Hannah. The late checkout? I asked, hearing my own voice strained to stay neutral. She smiled again, this time folding her arms. We were exhausted. I didn't want to make the drive back at 6 a.m. after a whole day of networking and panels. You've done conferences, you know how they go. I did. I also knew Ellie. She was confident, practiced. She told stories like she'd rehearsed them. And this one came too easy. But the part that really got me wasn't her words. It was her eyes. They didn't search mine. They didn't show worry or guilt or even annoyance. They were calm. Too calm. Steady. Rehearsed. I let her take the receipt. She crumpled it and tossed it in the trash like it meant nothing. Then she kissed my cheek and went to make tea, humming that same song from upstairs. I stood there in the office for a long time. The silence grew heavier by the second. It wasn't the receipt alone that got to me. It was how seamless her explanation was. The way she turned the situation around with confidence and clarity, as if she'd prepared for it. As if she knew exactly what I'd ask. It reminded me of the first time we met. She was on a panel at a local art event, talking about narrative control and how people will believe what's easiest to digest. She was magnetic up there, speaking in complete thoughts, drawing everyone in. That's who she was, graceful under pressure. Untouchable. So when she spun that story in the living room, I didn't challenge her. I didn't want to be the insecure husband. I didn't want to accuse her without proof. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to find out the truth. But something inside me had already shifted. A crack had formed. Thin, quiet, invisible to the outside world, but real. And once something cracks, it never goes back to what it was. I found myself watching her more closely that week. Not obsessively, but differently. Her routines. Her timing. Her tone when she talked about work. I started noticing things I hadn't before, not because they weren't there, but because I had never looked. I told myself to forget the receipt. That it could be exactly what she said it was. That people do nice things for coworkers all the time. That I trusted my wife. But trust, I was starting to realize, is like glass. Once a hairline fracture forms, it doesn't matter how strong it was before, it's only a matter of time. By Friday, I wasn't thinking about the receipt anymore. I was thinking about the way she smiled while texting someone she wouldn't name. The way she paused before answering simple questions. The way she started calling me babe more, like a buffer between us. Nothing had technically changed. She was still home every night. Still kissed me goodbye. Still said, I love you. But the routine, the one we'd built over 5 years, had started to feel like a performance. Like I was on the outside, watching something play out that I wasn't part of anymore. It was subtle, but it was real. And the scariest part? I couldn't prove any of it. All I had was a receipt, a story, and a feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. That night, after the whole thing with the receipt, I didn't sleep much. Ellie was curled up beside me, her breathing soft, one hand resting on my chest like she always did. But I just stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the ticking of the wall clock, thinking about the way she looked when I asked her about the hotel. The way she never flinched. And the thing is, I wanted to believe her. I really did. But belief started to feel like something I had to force. So I got up around 2 a.m., careful not to wake her, and went down to the garage. That space had always been my retreat, filled with half-finished projects and the kind of silence I used to find peaceful. But that night, it felt different. Like the walls were pressing in on me. I sat on an old stool next to my workbench, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, and let my thoughts run wild. It was like my brain had been waiting for permission to speak. And now that I'd given it an inch, it sprinted a mile. Memories started surfacing, random, insignificant ones that suddenly carried weight. There was the time Ellie told me her phone died while she was out with coworkers. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she said she was grabbing a late lunch after a workshop. I remember trying to call her because the grocery store was out of her brand of oat milk and I wasn't sure what substitute to grab. Her phone went straight to voicemail. No texts, no pings, no hey sorry, just saw this. Just silence. When she got home hours later, she said, oh, my battery was dead. You know how bad I am about charging it. I had shrugged it off at the time. But now? I started wondering who she had been with. And why she looked so refreshed when she walked in, cheeks flushed, smelling like lavender shampoo, not the kind we kept in our shower, but the kind you'd find at a hotel spa. Then there was the afternoon she drove up to her sister's place. At least, that's what she told me. Ellie had spent 2 days planning this elaborate gift basket. Wine, bath bombs, a little hand-knitted scarf. She made a big deal about it. But when she got back that night, she was empty-handed. Did she like the scarf? I asked without really thinking. Ellie froze for a split second. Oh yeah, loved it. Said she was going to wear it to work. I believed her. But now I remembered she had left the gift basket sitting by the door. I even tripped over it the next day and cursed under my breath before realizing what it was. She never brought it. Never gave it to her sister. And she never mentioned it again. Other memories followed, a breadcrumb trail I hadn't realized I was following until it led me right back to that hotel receipt. She'd started turning off her phone during gym sessions, not just silencing it, but turning it completely off. She claimed it helped her stay focused, said too many notifications were bad for her concentration. I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. But now I saw it differently. And it wasn't just the phone. It was little changes that, on their own, didn't raise alarms. A new set of passwords she said her company required. A few missed calls from JT that she quickly dismissed as a telemarketer. An expensive bottle of perfume she said was a sample, though it had a price tag attached to the bottom. There was even the night she came home after the gym with damp hair and said she showered at a friend's place. Water main was acting weird at the club, she said, brushing it off. But our gym has a backup generator. It's one of the reasons we joined. It all started to form a picture. Not a clear one. Not yet, but enough to change how I saw her. Even her smiles were different. I'd catch her grinning at her phone and then tucking it away the second she noticed me watching. She stopped narrating her day to me, stopped talking about her coworkers, the ones I used to know by name. Now she just said work was fine and left it at that. She still kissed me. Still said love you. But the words felt rehearsed, like lines from a script she'd memorized. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was projecting. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. And what scared me most wasn't the possibility of betrayal. It was the idea that she could lie to my face so easily. That she could fabricate an entire story in real time without blinking. That the person I had shared a bed with for 5 years could become a stranger in the time it takes to say it's not what it looks like. That night in the garage, I stayed up until the sun began to rise. When I finally crawled back into bed, she stirred, mumbled something about early meetings, and kissed my forehead. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, wondering if that kiss was real or just another part of her routine. Over the next few days, I watched her the way you'd watch a magician, looking for sleight of hand. And the more I paid attention, the more I realized how much of our life had been running on autopilot. She laughed at shows we used to enjoy, but I noticed her glancing at her phone more often during the jokes. She claimed she had to work late but never brought her laptop home anymore. She talked about people I'd never met using vague names like the new guy or a friend from legal. I started keeping a log, not officially but in my head. Every little detail, every discrepancy, every odd choice. And still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because part of me still hoped I was wrong. That there was a perfectly normal explanation for all of it. That I was just connecting dots that didn't belong to the same picture. But I knew better. I just didn't have the proof yet. And proof, I realized, would be the thing that decided whether this was a rough patch or the end of everything. It was 3 days later. The Thursday morning that would tear the last thread of doubt from my mind. I was printing out some paperwork on our shared laptop, something we hadn't really used together in months. It used to sit on the kitchen counter, open to our joint calendars, grocery lists, Pinterest boards for future trips. Lately, it just gathered dust. Ellie had started using her work laptop for everything, citing security protocols and corporate restrictions. I didn't question it. That had become a theme, me not questioning. Anyway, the printer jammed, which wasn't unusual, but when I rebooted the laptop to reprint, something strange happened. The desktop loaded and, for a moment, a folder flashed into view, one I didn't recognize. It was called sync_cloud_eb. I clicked before I could think twice. It opened a window of neatly organized folders. Inside were documents, *TS, and photos, all synced automatically from Ellie's phone. Judging by the timestamps, she hadn't realized it was connected to this laptop. It must have synced before she switched over to her company-issued device. I hesitated. There's this moment where your finger's on the mouse and you know whatever's on the other side will change everything. That was me staring at the folder, heart hammering, palms already sweating. I could close it, walk away, keep pretending. But I clicked. The first thing I saw was a selfie. Ellie standing in front of a full-length mirror in a hotel room. Short black dress. Wine glass in one hand. Curled hair. Full makeup. A look I hadn't seen in weeks, maybe months. Then another photo. Her on the bed. A room service tray in the foreground. Her legs curled under her, phone in hand. Smiling. Relaxed. And then the third photo, one that stopped my breath entirely. Ellie again, lying on the same bed, this time slightly turned toward the camera. But what struck me wasn't her pose. It was the hand, masculine, tan, unmistakably not mine, resting casually on her hip. Just out of frame, but there. In asterisk mate. Comfortable. I stared at that hand like it could speak. Like it might tell me its owner's name or explain what the hell it was doing on my wife. I felt something cold bloom in my chest, then spread slowly, steadily, like ink in water. There was more. I opened another folder titled Messages. It contained *TS from a messaging app one didn't recognize. The top contact name was JT. I clicked. The conversation was months deep. Dozens of *TS, each more damning than the last. JT, you looked amazing last night. I couldn't keep my hands off you. Ellie, same. I don't know how I went this long without this. JT, can't stop thinking about that sweet. That view. You. Ellie, let's go again next month. I'll make an excuse. He won't know. I stopped reading. My eyes refused to go further, but the damage was done. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This wasn't some drunken accident or spur-of-the-moment lapse. This was consistent. Repeated. Coordinated. They had plans. Nicknames. Locations. A routine. She had a second life. A life she kept just out of my line of sight, hidden behind conference trips and gym sessions and family visits that never actually happened. I sat back in the chair, hands still on the mouse, feeling like I was outside of my body. Like I was watching someone else's life burn down through a window. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just shut the laptop. Quietly. Slowly. And in that silence, something in me finally stopped pretending. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Poured myself a glass of water. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to drink. To swallow something, anything that wasn't bile. Then I sat on the couch, and for the first time in years I let myself feel the weight of everything I'd been avoiding. I thought about the promises we made. The vows. The little rituals, the Sunday pancakes, the good morning forehead kisses, the movie nights with her feet tucked under my thigh. All of it was real to me. But to her? I didn't know anymore. Was she ever really present? Or had I just been filling space in a story she'd outgrown? I replayed moments that once felt normal, the times she told me she was tired, the weekends she said she needed alone time, the nights she said she'd be home late because of a last-minute meeting. And I realized how expertly she had built this illusion. How easy I'd made it for her to keep the lie going. She didn't even have to try that hard. Because I had been asleep. I had believed in us so deeply, I stopped questioning the details. I filled in the blanks with trust. With hope. With a version of her I thought I understood. And in doing so, I gave her the perfect cover. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't storm into her office or send a long, bitter text. I didn't even change my expression when she walked in later that evening, talking about traffic and some podcasts she'd been listening to. She kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner. I said, not sure yet, and smiled like nothing had happened. Because I needed time. Time to process. Time to plan. Time to figure out what I wanted from the ashes of our marriage. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to humiliate her or explode our lives in one dramatic confrontation. What I needed was clarity. And I finally had it. For the first time in months, the fog had lifted. The truth, painful as it was, had given me a gift. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the paranoid husband digging for ghosts. There were no ghosts. Just a reality I had refused to see. She had lied. Repeatedly. Deliberately. To my face. And the worst part wasn't that she cheated. It was that she was so good at it. So practiced. So composed. So effortlessly convincing. I realized, sitting there on the couch with my untouched glass of water, that the version of her I'd been holding on to no longer existed. Maybe she never had. And now? Now I had to figure out what came next. But one thing was already clear, there was no going back to before. That version of our life, our marriage, was over. And I was the only one who hadn't known it yet. The next morning, Ellie was gone. Not just out running errands or heading to work early, gone. No note. No text. No explanation. Her side of the bed was empty, the covers barely disturbed. I checked the bathroom, the closet, the driveway. Her car was gone too. At first, I assumed she left early for a meeting. Then I thought maybe she'd gone for a run. But noon came and went and she still hadn't returned. I sent her a text. Then another. Then I called. Straight to voicemail. By late afternoon, I was pacing the kitchen. Her gym bag was still there. Her work laptop. Even her favorite water bottle sat untouched on the counter. I checked her location on Find My Phone. Location unavailable. That had never happened before. I called her sister. Then her mom. Neither had heard from her. I called her office, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't unraveling inside. They told me she hadn't shown up and hadn't called in. Just a no-show. She's probably taking a mental health day, her manager said. Happens more than you'd think. I nodded like that made sense. Like that explained the way the house suddenly felt colder, emptier. Like her silence wasn't screaming at me from every corner. That night, I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling again. Same ceiling. New weight. She still hadn't come home. Her phone was still off. Her Instagram hadn't updated. Even her burner social accounts, yes, I knew about those now, had gone quiet. It was like she'd evaporated. I kept waiting for the moment when it would make sense. When I'd get a call or a message or a sudden knock on the door and she'd come in laughing, explaining it all away. But nothing came. And as the days passed, I started to understand. She hadn't left for a day. She had left. For real. I told myself she was just processing things. That maybe she knew the truth had leaked out somehow and this was her way of buying time. But even that hope, shaky and fragile, fell apart when I opened her drawer on day 3. All her favorite jewelry was gone. So were her passports. I hadn't noticed until then that her black duffel bag, her go-to for weekend getaways, was missing from the top shelf in our closet. And when I checked our bank account, I saw a withdrawal. $2,000 in cash. Pulled the night before she vanished. She didn't run. She planned. It made me nauseous. Not just the lie, but the quiet of it. The control. The fact that she hadn't even tried to talk to me before disappearing. She just left. As if I was a chapter she'd finished reading. As if I didn't deserve an ending. A week passed. Then, too, I didn't file a missing person report. I thought about it. But I knew deep down she wasn't missing. She was gone. And there's a difference. Everyone I talked to, her friends, co-workers, even her yoga instructor, acted surprised. That's so unlike her, they said. Ellie wouldn't just disappear. But none of them knew about JD. None of them had seen the photos or read the messages or watched her spin lies like silk. They didn't know her like I did. Or maybe they knew a version I never got to meet. By the third week, I stopped talking about her to anyone. What could I say? My wife vanished after I caught her cheating? She didn't leave a note, just a void? People want clean stories. Mine wasn't clean. It was messy and quiet and full of moments that didn't make sense. And then, on a Wednesday, a letter came. Handwritten. No return address. Postmarked from a small town 3 hours away. The handwriting was hers. Neat. Straight. Unmistakable. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of cream stationery. No, dear Jason. No salutation. Just this. I couldn't pretend anymore. I drowned in the lies, in the weight of keeping up with myself. I know I hurt you. But I had to get out before I became something worse. I left to breathe again. You deserve clean air too. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just those lines. Sharp. Quiet. Heavy. I read it 10 times. Then 20. Each time I thought I'd find something new. Some clue. Some hint about where she'd gone or what came next. But it was all there already. She was gone. Not kidnapped. Not hiding. Not waiting for a moment to come home and beg for forgiveness. She left to breathe. And that's what struck me most, how calm it sounded. Like her leaving wasn't destruction but escape. Like our life had become a cage and walking away was mercy. At first, I felt a flash of anger. Who does that? Who walks out on a marriage like it's an old job they outgrew? But then it turned into something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to understanding. Because I had felt it too, the suffocation. The weight of pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. Of asking questions in my head I didn't dare say out loud. She just said it first. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Not her sister. Not my friends. Not my parents. It was mine. The final page of the story we wrote together. Or maybe the prologue to something else entirely. I folded it once. Then again. Then I slid it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. It stayed there for 3 more days. On the 4th, I took it outside. Lit a match. Watched it burn, corner by corner, until all that was left were black edges and thin trails of smoke. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. That letter was the last lie she told. Even if it was honest, it was still a lie by omission. A way of escaping consequence without conversation. A way of wrapping up 5 years in 5 lines. And I didn't want it in my house anymore. I stood in the backyard, watching the ashes rise. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the lawn we used to mow together. The dogwood tree swayed softly like it was whispering something I couldn't quite hear. And for the first time since she vanished, I inhaled. Really inhaled. And I realized she was right about one thing. The air was clean. For days after I burned the letter, there was a knock at the door. It startled me. Not because it was loud, but because no one had knocked on that door since Ellie left. People texted. They called. The mail came quietly. But this felt deliberate. I opened it slowly. Standing there was Laura, Ellie's younger sister. She looked exactly how I remembered her, short auburn hair, oversized coat, dark eyes that always seemed to see more than she let on. But today her expression was different. No jokes. No half-smiles. Just a quiet sort of worry. In her hands was a cardboard box. Medium-sized. Taped shut. The corners were worn like it had been handled too many times. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She didn't move. "I won't stay," she said. She asked me to bring this to you." My stomach tightened. "Ellie?" She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "It came in the mail a few days ago." "No note. Just the box." I thought about opening it. But I figured you should see it first. I looked at the box. It didn't hum with drama or mystery. It just sat there in her hands like a leftover chore. Like something she wanted out of her orbit. "Did she say where she is?" I asked, not really expecting a yes. "No," Laura shook her head. "And honestly, I'm not sure I'd tell you if she did." I couldn't blame her for that. She held the box out. I took it. It was heavier than it looked. "Whatever's in there," she said, "it's not mine to keep. And I think you'll want to see it." I nodded. "Thanks." She hesitated, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was awkward. Sad. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. Then she turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the same silence Ellie had left behind. I set the box on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it out, tape and all. Pretend it didn't exist. That Ellie hadn't reached across the void again with some final word. But curiosity's a loud thing. especially when you've been living in quiet. I peeled the tape back and opened the flaps. On top was a scarf. One I'd seen before, navy blue, with tiny stars stitched along the edges. Ellie used to wear it on cold mornings when we walked to the bakery near our house. I hadn't seen it in years. Beneath that, an old Polaroid camera. The kind we used on our second anniversary to take silly pictures around the city. The lens was cracked, but the strap still had her initials on it. Then a paperback novel. The Bell Jar. Torn spine. Corners dog-eared. I'd seen it on her nightstand 100 times. She used to fall asleep with it open on her chest. A keycard came next. Riverstone Hotel. Room 308. My chest clenched. The same place. The same room, maybe. I turned it over, there was nothing on the back. Just that smooth plastic, smudged with fingerprints. I placed it face down on the table. Finally, at the very bottom of the box was a flash drive. Small. Black. No label. I held it for a moment, unsure. It didn't hum or glow or buzz, but it felt heavier than it should. Like it held things I wasn't supposed to know. I plugged it into the laptop, the same one that had given me everything else. The folder that opened was called Just In Case. Inside were audio files. Dozens of them. Dates going back months. Each file was named something vague. Thursday, Drive 308, Ocean. I clicked on one at random. Drive. The file loaded. Static. Then voices. Ellie's. And someone else's. A man. Did he suspect anything? The man asked. Calm. Confident. No, Ellie replied. He never does. I told him I had a work dinner. He kissed me goodbye. Then laughter. Soft. Familiar. I clicked another file. Ocean. Ellie again, this time sounding distant. We could leave, you know. Start over. You said you wanted that. I do, the man said. I just need time. The kids? My breath caught. The kids? I clicked another. 308. The same two voices. Louder this time. In the background, I could hear hotel noise, doors closing, water running, a faint echo. Someday he'll figure it out, the man said. Ellie sighed. Maybe. But by then we'll be gone. I closed the laptop. My fingers hovered over the trackpad ready to delete everything. But I didn't. Not yet. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan. Strategic. Rehearsed. Deliberate. She had been preparing to vanish long before I found that receipt. This wasn't about escaping guilt, it was about avoiding consequence. And JT, whoever he really was, had a family too. Kids. A wife, maybe. Another web of lies, another life half living in the shadows. I looked at the box again. The scarf. The book. The camera. It felt like a message. A goodbye. A confession. Or maybe a dare. Either way, it was the end. I didn't tell anyone about the drive. Not Laura. Not my therapist. Not even the one friend who still checked in every few days with cautious hope in his voice. Some things don't need to be shared. Some truths are meant to stay sealed. I copied the files to a password-protected folder, then ejected the drive and placed it back in the box. I taped it shut. Labeled it in black marker, Ellie. Do not open. Then I slid it into the back of the closet behind an old winter coat I never wore. Out of sight. Not out of mind. But enough. That night I made myself a drink. Sat on the porch. Listened to the crickets and the wind and the occasional sound of a neighbor's dog barking into the darkness. And for the first time I didn't feel the need to search. Not for her. Not for more answers. Not for the version of us that used to exist. She'd given me all the proof I could ever need. And I had made peace with never hearing her voice again. Because now, when I pictured her, I didn't see her face. I saw a closed door. And I had no intention of knocking. I burned the letter. I boxed up her things. I shut down the folder with her voice and that man's. JT. Buried somewhere deep in a drive I hope I never open again. Not because I needed revenge or some dramatic finale, but because I needed a clean slate. I needed silence. I started small. I gave away her books to a local library drop box. I donated the scarves, the jewelry she forgot, the shoes still lined neatly in the hallway closet. Every item felt lighter leaving the house. I wiped her fingerprints from the touchscreens, deleted her accounts from the shared Spotify, our smart TV, the calendar app that used to ping with our dinner reservations. Her ghost was everywhere, and I was done living with it. Then I got a dog. His name's Finn. A scruffy black mutt with a crooked ear and eyes that don't judge. I found him at a shelter on a random Sunday. I didn't want to be alone. He doesn't ask questions. Just follows me from room to room, settles by my feet when I work, nudges my hand when I stare too long at the walls. The house feels different with him here. Not healed, just livable. I stopped talking about her. Not to my friends, not to Laura, not even in my own head. She had taken enough space. I was done giving her more. One afternoon, I walked through our bedroom, my bedroom now, and realized the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet, and that somehow felt like progress. The house didn't just change. I changed it. I painted the walls, lightened everything, got rid of the dull gray in the living room Ellie had insisted on, replaced it with soft white and warm wood. I sold her car. I opened the windows more. And then, something bigger. I opened the photography studio I'd always talked about but never pursued. I signed the lease on a tiny corner space downtown and filled it with light and plants and hope. I called it Clear Frame. Felt symbolic. Friends visited. Some knew the story. Most didn't ask. I didn't offer. There wasn't anything left to say. Occasionally, a reminder would pop up. An old calendar invite, a photo stuck between receipts, a playlist with her favorite road trip songs. I didn't delete them all, but I didn't keep them either. One day, I found our anniversary photo tucked in a drawer, face down. I almost put it back. Instead, I walked outside, lit a match, and watched it curl into ash in the fire pit. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. It just felt done. I'm not healed. That's not the word I'd use. But I'm no longer surviving. I'm living, rebuilt, stronger, quieter, and finally free.